G'day again, Tim here. This tip is about double tracking. So that's to add a little bit more body and volume or depth without blowing out the meters or over compressing or anything like that for your audio sweepers, productions, that kind of thing. I've got a little promo here for CraigTube. It's called You Wouldn't. So this is one that's got various production elements in it. So there's a whole lot of different things going on. I've got 3 different voices and some music, which obviously we can't use on YouTube, so I've got that muted. And all these production elements here, like sound design kind of things. So what I wanted to do is, because I've taken some of these tracks from different sources, I want to be able to actually boost this one here, which is Craig himself from CraigTube. And I just want to give that a little bit more depth and volume. So I'll play it to you on its own. I'll just solo that one out and have a listen to this.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
Okay, so it's actually got some compression on it. So if you want to run through the signal chain here, we're just rolling off the bottom end just to clean it up a little bit. We've got some compression there. We've got a little bit of vocal rider on top of that, and just to help even it out a bit. And also a peak limiter at the end. Slow attack, slowish attack, and a lot slower release time with just a little bit of gain. So what I wanted to do, just so that sort of fits in amongst everything a lot better, is actually just give that a bit more of a boost in a different way. So let's listen to it sort of as it stands amongst everything else. Let's go back to the beginning.
You wouldn't jump out of a plane without a parachute.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
And you wouldn't go a Friday night without CraigTube either, would you?
So you can see how everything sort of fits in together, and there's quite a bit going on. So what I want to do is actually just take this track here, and we'll just go duplicate in this particular case. So that'll give us an exact copy in exactly the same place as the previous one. Okay, so we've now essentially down here got 2 copies. Everything's the same, all the plugins, everything. Okay, so in this case, I don't actually want the same volume because that's going to absolutely make everything go crazy on the levels. So what I just want to do is just fade it in until I get what I want. Okay, so the sound that I'm looking for. So again, just use your ears and dial it into where it sounds good. So let's give it a crack.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
And you wouldn't go a...
It's quite short, so it's a little bit hard to tell. Yeah, so you got to pull it in until it sounds good.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
And you wouldn't go a Friday...
So we'll go back to this one.
Without a parachute.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
And you wouldn't go a Friday night without CraigTube either.
So in the context of everything, we just added a little bit more volume and a little bit more depth. In some cases, what I could do in this one is actually compress this one even harder. So actually make it work harder, and then so it's actually got a higher volume, or even limit it harder. So let's have a look at this and see what's going on here.
Without a parachute.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
Let's play it again.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
So we can actually slam it a little bit harder, so the peaks there are getting squashed a lot more. And that way we can actually drop it down in volume a little bit more, but still have that intensity and not have so much gain taken up overall.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
And you...
See how just sliding that in changes it? Let's mute that one.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
It kind of thickens it up a little bit too, right? So here we go.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
And you...
So it just adds some more depth. So now that we've got the 2 together, let's put it all back to the beginning.
You wouldn't jump out of a plane without a parachute.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
And you wouldn't go a Friday night without CraigTube either, would you?
There you go. So how to thicken up a vocal, how to give it more impact just by doubling. And even if you wanted to, you could probably change the position of that and even give it a little bit of a small delay effect if you wanted to. Let's just move it here. Oops, undo that because it's grabbed that top one as well. Let's get rid of that. We'll throw it into mono so we're making sure we're not getting any phasing issues.
You wouldn't brew beer without...
Bit too far. Let's zoom in a bit more, right?
Brew beer.
Try that.
brew beer without yeast.
And you wouldn't.
So that just changes it again.
You wouldn't brew beer without yeast.
And you.
So there's all sorts of little tricks you can do just by adjusting things and changing things around a little bit. But the idea behind that is just to really boost that signal, but without going crazy about it, and just giving it a little bit more depth and a little bit more volume and a little bit more impact. So I hope that's helped. It's another approach to take to thickening up a vocal without overdoing the compression. Cheers. Catch you on the next video, and happy mixing.